Sorry, boy, but his captain's got to teach his men what happens to those what crossing.
Captain's got to teach stuff.
Good evening from the Batcave. It is Monday, March 28th, 2022, and I had a pretty good question posed to me. This is by Ron on my channel, and I wanted to respond to that. I think, Ron, to answer your question about what's potentially dangerous about the mid-trib position versus the pre-trib position versus the pre-ret position, I'm open to hearing what other people might think would be dangerous about the mid-trib position. I don't think there is anything that's dangerous. I think your worst case scenario with the mid-trib position is that after the abomination and desolation, if the rapture doesn't happen that day, well, you're in danger of getting your head chopped off. If the pre-wrath position is right, and the mid-trib position is wrong, well, you're in danger of getting your head chopped off, which you would have been anyways. Maybe you're gonna have less bottled water stashed up for the the duration of the quote unquote antichrist great tribulation. Here's the problem. If someone had complete control of the world right now and said that they were going to kill everybody who wasn't who professed to be a Christian, well, they can do that, and honestly, I'm not going to be able to stop them. I mean, if they wanted to seize up all my money, am I going to last 3.5 years? Heck no. I can't hunt and fish. I mean, how many people know how to hunt to fish to the point that they can survive? I mean, really survive without food. And think about this. It's not just surviving in terms of getting the food for yourself. It's keeping the food against all the other people that want it. No way. No way. Jesus said, this is, I'm going to take his words very seriously, okay? And this is something that I think these guys who came up with this theory, I think they spent a fair amount of time thinking about it, but I think they spent most of their time thinking about what's wrong with the pre-trib theory. I don't think they spent a lot of time meditating on what this would look like and really putting it in real time and really thinking about this. So let's just look at what Jesus says here. This is in Matthew 24, and this is his preface to his explanation of Luke 17, which explains the rapture, okay? Now remember, in Matthew 24, he's explaining the sign of his coming, and that's the abomination of desolation, okay? So he tells them all the things that are not the sign, and then he talks about them being delivered up, afflicted, and killed, and hated by all nations. Now this is not the Antichrist persecution. This is the persecution that is going to be led by false prophets and false Christs, okay? This is probably going to be like a New Age, New World Order persecution, which the New Age has always taught once we get rid of all the Christians, we're going to basically project this utopia out there. It's Luciferianism, but it's this idea that we can will the universe to goodness, essentially, or if we all work together without the obstruction of these people who think their truth is the only truth, kind of thing. Okay, so this is, then shall many be offended and betray one another and shall hate one another. This is all happening in the body of Christ right now. Now people are being afflicted and killed all over the world. In America, not so much. But this is what is happening in America in a big way. Then shall many be offended and shall betray one another and shall hate one another. I can tell you, I've experienced and been on the wrong side of being offended and hating, and definitely have been betrayed by people I thought were my brothers and sisters in Christ. And I'm sure there's people who might even say such things about me. Now some of it's perspective, but the point is many are offended. The offenses will abound. We're all doing stupid things. We're all getting more simple. Even the most solid Christians are either avoiding people who need their help, quite frankly, or they're getting tainted by this world, because this world is getting more and more wicked and dark every single day. I mean, I just looked at how angry I would get through COVID and stuff like that, and things that have offended me in the past year that I've just gotten way more angry about than I've gotten in the past. Why? Because this world is filling this. There's demonic forces that are filling this world up with rage because they're preparing people to betray and kill one another. Okay, That's why this thing says, many false prophets will rise and deceive many, and because iniquity shall abound, the love of many shall wax cold. And it's not talking about many in the world, it's talking about many in the world and the church. That's why Christians are just dropping each other left and right. I don't want to deal with you anymore. I don't want to interact with that person. And Ron, you know what I'm talking about, you know? That's fine if somebody doesn't want to interact, but you know what they have a biblical obligation to do? If somebody repents of something or asks for forgiveness, as they come to you 77 times and repent, you know what they have a biblical obligation to do? Forgive. Just forgive. And forgiveness isn't, that's nice, but I don't want anything to do with you. That's not forgiveness. Okay. And then it says, but he that endures to the end shall be saved. Okay. Now, he says this gospel will be preached in the world for a witness to all the nations, and then the end will come. And if you compile this with what's said in Matthew 10 and Luke 21, are being brought before all the nations and killed and stuff like that is going to be that witness. And then he tells them to flee in Jerusalem because he talks about this as the days of trouble. Now, I don't need to discern when it's going to be here, because if I just go to Daniel 12, which is talking about the exact same thing, he tells you that that's when the resurrection and rapture occurs. So does Revelation 11, so does 1 Corinthians 15. They tell you it's right then. So does Luke 17. So if you go to Daniel 15, or I'm sorry, Daniel 12, there's no Daniel 15. Now, here this is taking you up to the midpoint in Daniel, and that's when the Antichrist, it says he sets up his tabernacles and then he comes to his end and no one will help him, okay? Now, here it says, and from the time that the daily sacrifice is taken away and the abomination of desolation is set up, there should be 1,290 days, okay? So we know from the abomination of desolation there's 3.5 years. But then he says, how long shall it be till the end of these wonders? Now remember, he hasn't yet described the abomination of desolation being set up in the 3.5 years after that. He's talking about, remember, Daniel is responding to him, describing Michael standing up, and those that sleep in the dust of the earth to awake, some to everlasting life, some to shame and content, and those that are wise shine like brightness in the firmament. That's us being transformed like stars and being caught up to the New Jerusalem. And they that turn many to righteousness as the stars forever and ever. Now Paul's going to elaborate on that in 1 Corinthians 15. So that's the end of it. And then they tell him to shut the words and seal them. And then Daniel, I'm sorry. And then it says, and one said to the man clothed in linen. Okay. So now remember, there's two angels, and one is saying to the other, how long will it be till the end of these wonders? Okay. Now the wonders he just gave him ends right here with Michael arising, and that's him getting up to cast Satan out of heaven, and then that's the resurrection and the rapture. And he says it's going to be for a time, time and a half to times. And when he shall have accomplished to scatter the power of the holy people, then all these things shall be finished. Now, how does he scatter the power of the holy people? And the answer is this. He sits in the temple and he claims that he's God, and they all flee Jerusalem. He scattered the power of the holy people, okay? They've all left. They've all run, okay? So when he scattered their power, that's the midpoint, okay? And that's when this happens. It's at the seventh trumpet. So he's told him, and then he says after that, this is the time after that, from the time that the daily sacrifice is taken away and the abomination that maketh desolate is set up, there shall be 1,290 days. Blessed is he that waiteth and cometh to the 1,335 days. And that's talking about those people who are going to survive the second half, which are Jews. Okay, there are going to be Gentiles that survive, but he's saying he's referring specifically to the Jews who are going to be fleeing Jerusalem here. Okay, and this is what Christ is talking about. This is exactly what Christ is talking about in his discourse, which is why he says this is the abomination of desolation spoken by Daniel. Okay, so and then he says, let them that are in Judea flee to the mountains. That's the power of the holy people being scattered. Okay, and then he says, for then there will be great tribulation, such as not been at the beginning of this time, nor shall be. Now, how do I know that's the midpoint? Because it's going to say the same thing in Daniel. Watch this. It says, at that time Michael shall stand up. We know this is Revelation 12. The prince which standeth for the children of thy people, and there shall be a time of trouble, such as never was since there was a nation, even to that time. And at that time thy people shall be delivered, everyone that's found written in the book. Now, how are thy people delivered? They're delivered through the resurrection, or the rapture, or through fleeing Jerusalem. That's how they're delivered. Okay. So, but when we talk about these shining as the brightness of the firmament, look, you can go to most your Bible commentaries, and your cross references right there are going to take you right to 1 Corinthians 15. And at 1 Corinthians, it's going to take you right back here because that's what Paul was talking about. Okay, that's at the last trump. That's at the seventh trump. So when we get to now the danger. Okay, what if I'm wrong? What if my timing's all wrong? What if the pre-wrathers are right or the pre-tribbers are right? Well, if the pre-tribbers are right, that's the easiest one. Well, we'll all be raptured before this stuff happens, so there's no real danger there. Okay. Worst case scenario is we come across as, doomsday, gloom and doom wingnuts who aren't rejoicing enough because we're too focused on all the bad things that are going to happen. Okay, that's our worst case scenario. But we all are watching and waiting. We get caught up in the rapture and we'll be fine. Okay. If the pre-wrath camp is right, it's the same difference. I'm going to get caught up before I would have thought, which is going to be during this persecution, but it's going to be after the midpoint. But it's still even in their case, it's after the abomination of desolation and a certain length of time of persecution of Christians, we get caught up. They don't get caught up on the day of the abomination of desolation, and that's the worst case scenario. And I might sit there and go, "Oh no, I wasn't raptured." But guess what? If you're not raptured here, well, you just be prepared to lay down your life rather than take the mark of the beast. If you're saved, you will do that. Okay. So there isn't really any danger there. Okay. But here's the danger if the pre-wrath camp is wrong and it gets popularly adopted. And I want you to hear this and try to explain this to the people that in that camp, and get them to just fast forward to this point. Okay. This is the danger. Now I want you to imagine this. You're in the sixth seal, okay? The sixth seal hits. Now, before the sixth seal hits, let's look very carefully at these signs here. Now, remember, these guys expect the rapture to be before the sixth seal, which means if you get to the sixth seal and the rapture hasn't passed, you have one of two things to assume. Either they were wrong, or the rapture did occur, but you weren't one of the ones taken. Okay, you have to remember the danger of thinking the rapture occurred, but you weren't one of the ones taken. Okay. Now, what if, World War III is going on? What if Christians are getting persecuted and disappearing? What if people are dying of plagues and getting put in pandemic camps or concentration camps because they're being persecuted, and World War III is happening and lockdowns are happening? I mean, we're seeing this today. Do you know how many of my fellow Christian friends could have disappeared and I wouldn't know because I wasn't allowed to go to church? Think about just that, okay? Now, what if all of a sudden they're disappeared and then all of a sudden I hear, no, they were raptured. The rapture happened, you just missed it. You didn't see it, they were all raptured. Well, how do I know? How do I know? How do I know they were raptured? Because here's the thing. All the verses that describe Jesus shining as lightning and every eye seeing him and all that are in Luke 17, and the pre-wrath camp doesn't give any weight to Luke 17, really. They don't really pay attention to it. They act like Jesus' first teaching on his second coming is at the Olivet Discourse, and that's not true. Okay, they don't understand that Jesus was expounding on Luke 17 in the Olivet Discourse. Okay, so think about this. All this stuff's happening, and then all this crazy stuff happens. Okay, now remember this. Remember what the rapture looks like according to Daniel 12. It says the wise will shine like stars in the brightness of the firmament. Okay. Now, the way I would describe the rapture is about a bunch of shooting stars going up to Jerusalem, but here you have a bunch of stars falling to the earth. Okay. Now, can you imagine this happening? And you have all these stars falling to earth, right? How do I know if I see that? If I see a bunch of stars falling, okay? Now we all know what a falling star or a shooting star looks like, okay? This could be meteors crashing to the earth, it could be satellites falling down, or it could be actual stars, shooting stars, or whatever it looks like. But the point is, isn't that what the rapture looks like? So if that occurs, can you see how easily I could be deceived into thinking the rapture happened, I just wasn't raptured? When in reality, they're really disappearing all these Christians because they're taking them to death camps and killing them. Right? Or they're dying from World War III, or they're dying from plagues. 25% of the earth is going to get killed. So think about that when the sixth seal happens and it rolls out and all these stars are falling, and you're going, oh no, those were shooting stars. That was the rapture. And of course, you don't have any pictures, you don't have images of it. All the internet, satellites, all these things are knocked down because the whole earth is shaking all over the place. And then when it's done, then you have the seven trumpets, okay? And in the seven trumpets, and this is something that the pre-wrathers don't deal with either. This is one of the 4 questions I asked Alan Kirshner, okay? In the 7 trumpets, you have all 7 seals opened, and then you have the 7 trumpets, okay? And in the 7th trumpet, which is Revelation chapter 8, I'm sorry, you have in Revelation chapter 9, you have the 3 woes beginning. And the first woe is a bottomless pit. And the locusts that come out of this bottomless pit have a king over them who is called in the Greek tongue Apollyon. Okay, now think about this. He's just appearing in the 7th trump. Or I'm sorry, in the 5th trump he's appearing. Okay. Now it tells you in Revelation chapter 9 that this is the guy who kills the 2 witnesses. And it tells you in Revelation, and when it's describing Mystery Babylon in chapter 17, that it's the Antichrist, okay? So, again, the angel of the bottomless pit, okay? That's what he's called here. Now in chapter 11, he's called the beast that ascendeth out of the bottomless pit. So it has to be the angel who just came out of the bottomless pit 2 chapters earlier, okay? Who else would it be? The beast that comes out of the bottomless pit is the angel of the bottomless pit, okay? So maybe the angel is the demonic entity that's driving him, I don't know. But he comes out of the bottomless pit. He ascends out of the bottomless pit, okay? So let's go to Revelation chapter 17. He says, the beast that thou saw that is not and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit and go into perdition is they that dwell on the earth. And it says whose names... So the beast comes out of the bottomless pit. So we have the angel ascend out of the bottomless pit in the 5th trumpet. So how can the trumpets be at the end? Think about where they put the trumpets. They put the trumpets towards the latter end, basically in the last year, essentially, of Daniel's 70th week. So how do you have the Antichrist just coming out of the bottomless pit in the 5th trumpet? It doesn't make sense. And of course, the plague that goes with them lasts 5 months. And that's the only reason why they make it last even 5 months. Otherwise, they would try to squeeze it all in at the end because they got to figure out where to put the 2 witnesses. Their theory doesn't make sense. Okay? But imagine this. After you have all these shooting stars, you have all the earth shaking, all these people going underground, hiding from the wrath of the Lamb, and then you have these plagues start coming from the trumpets. You have fire coming down from heaven. You have waters turning to blood. And then the beast starts to arise. And he has this locust army with him, which for all we know, we don't know. Are these drones? Are these demons? We don't know. Let's assume they're demons, okay? But the point is are they stinging him and tormenting him? And the answer is no. But who are they stinging and tormenting? Whoever doesn't have the seal of God on their forehead. So they're not tormenting non-believers. Or I'm sorry, they're not tormenting believers. They're tormenting non-believers. And the guy who seems to have who's not getting tormented by them and seems to have the power over them is claiming to be the returned Christ. Think about how pervasive this deception is going to be. Unless you believe, you will see the abomination of desolation followed by Jesus appearing in the clouds, followed by the rapture happening. No 6th seal, saints. The 6th seal has already come and gone, okay? But if they're wrong, maybe they're right. Well, at the 6th seal, well before I would think, just like with the pre-trib theory. See, I think the 6th seal is before the tribulation. So, based on my timeline of the 6th seal, it's pre-trib rapture still. It's before Daniel's 70th week, okay? So either way, I'm raptured before I thought I was. Okay, so that's the danger if they're right. If they're right, I get raptured before I thought I was. If they're wrong, I get deceived into thinking that these falling stars were the shooting stars that were the rapture. And somebody can tell me the rapture already happened and they're back and here they are and blah, blah, blah. And they're in the Middle East and they're setting up the Lord's kingdom. And the Lord starts getting together and making world peace, seemingly. And the last thing he has to do is basically defeat this Antichrist and false prophet, which are the two witnesses, because that's what Jesus does at Armageddon. He shows up and he captures the Antichrist and the false prophet. Well, there's going to be two witnesses here that the Antichrist goes and has to go kill after he's done with his campaign, just like Jesus does. Okay? So that's the danger. The danger is that you're setting people up to look for Christ when I believe the Antichrist is just arising. And I think the text is clear that that's when the Antichrist is arising. The text is crystal clear that the Antichrist starts to, if you understand that the beast from the bottomless pit is the Antichrist, and the angel of the bottomless pit doesn't come out until the fifth trumpet, then it has to be after the 7 seals, because the trumpets don't start until the 7 seals are done. So these guys have, I'm telling you, man, these guys haven't thought their position through. I don't know why they're not listening to me. I don't know. Maybe this is all part of God's, maybe this is all part of the great delusion. Maybe these guys, even if they are genuinely born-again Christians, maybe they're contributing to this great delusion that's meant to captivate everybody who's not reading the Bible for themselves. Because let's face it, most people who are going to pre-wrath as an idea, they haven't studied it out for themselves. They just know enough to know that the pre-trib is wrong. But they haven't studied it out for themselves. They haven't sit there and taken the Gospels themselves and just taken it at face value and said, well, wait a minute, what does Jesus say? He says, when you're fleeing Jerusalem, one will be taken, one will be left. When he comes. That's what he says in Luke 17. And then in Matthew 24, they say, well, what will be the sign of your coming? He says, the abomination of desolation. And then I'm going to appear in the cloud and you're going to see one taken, one left. I mean, you can take all the language and try to, nitpick the Greek all you want, but at the end of the day, you have Luke, him saying, I'm going to appear, and when you're fleeing Jerusalem that night, you're going to see one taken and one left. And then Matthew 24, he's going to say, the only thing he's going to really add to that is when you see the abomination of desolation, that's when you flee. Luke 21 says, when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies. And we know from Daniel 11 that Jerusalem is surrounded by armies when the Antichrist sets up his camp in the southwest, and the kings of the east set up their camp in the northeast to prepare for Armageddon. That's when Jerusalem is surrounded by armies. So we got Luke 21 as one witness, that it takes you right to the midpoint, which is the midpoint in Luke 21 is where Daniel 11 ends and Daniel 12 begins. And in the book of Revelation, it's where the 7th trumpet is blown in chapter 11. In Matthew 24, it's when the abomination of desolation occurs. So we have 3 witnesses that say, here's the midpoint. I don't know why these guys don't or won't see that. I just know that they're wrong. So I hope that answers your question, Ron, and I hope that's something you could succinctly report back to those who will listen to you and not to me. I don't care. I don't need the notoriety. I just need the information to get out there. So be blessed, and I appreciate your help in trying to transmit that information. So have a good night. Have an out. Peace.
Peace, I'm out. I'm Batman.